Greetings, travelers! Today we're going to come up with a multi-class build that I adore, which will be my first but not last attempt to build monks that work. To that end, I'll be mixing in a dark horse subclass, a favorite of mine, the Spore Druid. And best of all, this build comes online earlier than almost any other multi-class build, even if it pays the price waiting a bit longer for extra attack. To begin with, since we're going to have druid levels that will help augment the monk's somewhat lackluster utility options, we'll pick a race that complements the particular needs of shapeshifters. In this case, we're going with the Hexblood lineage, a lineage so perfect for certain types of druids that I consider it every time I build one right up there with the Tortle and the Thri-kreen races. For this build, AC won't be a particular issue, so the Tortle doesn't really compete. We are looking for a particular spell we can't get from Thri-kreen. The Hexblood is another lineage from Von Richten's Guide to Ravenloft, and we get to layer it on top of an existing race, which opens up a huge number of role-playing opportunities. For this character, we'll take Lizardfolk. Now, careful reading of the lineage rules reveals that we do not get to retain our swim speed, though a generous GM might decide otherwise, if we are picking the lineage at character creation. But I am after Lizardfolk more for their lore as true nature lovers, who would see nothing wrong with a little bit of spore-based necromancy here and there. The Hexblood lineage grants us some excellent features, 2 skills and dark vision to start with, and then a really interesting feature, the Eerie Token. You can grab a lock of your hair, nail, or a tooth, I think for this character we'll use a scale, and hand it to a party member. With this token, we can do a one-off trance to observe the location of the token for 1 minute, but the feature Telepathic Message can be used all day and allows us to communicate with the token holder, which will help with infiltration, splitting the party, and allows us to communicate while in Wildshape. It's only one-way communication, but still incredibly useful. Last but not least, we get Hex Magic, which adds the Disguise Self and Hex spells to our spell list, and allows us to cast one of those spells for free once a day. This is huge. Druids are incredibly versatile spellcasters that generally have no illusion spells at all, so adding a concentration-free Disguise Self to our list is a great addition, even on a low charisma character. That all being said, the Hex spell is the reason we took Hexblood, and we'll get to that in a little bit. Our stats will be 17 Dexterity, 16 Wisdom, 14 Constitution, 10 Intelligence, 8 Charisma, and 8 Strength. We could swap Dexterity and Wisdom if you have a particular Wisdom half-feat in mind, but for my build we'll go with a higher Dexterity to help our damage. For our background, I will be going with Hermit, even if I have to redo the skills. The reason is because I think it fits with a nature-loving Spore Necromancer, and to avert a particular lore issue that Spore Druids sometimes run into. I'm always hopeful that GMs will allow our Spore Druid to do necromancy-adjacent magic as a nicer plant magic rather than evil sorcery. To that end, I will ask my GM to let my discovery feature from Hermit be the discovery of spore or plant-based necromancy spells, such that our Animate Dead spell or fungal infestation feature will spawn plant creatures more akin to a shambling mound rather than a zombie, a decomposition elemental or similar, rather than just a spooky skeleton that will scare all nearby villagers. I'm not suggesting we change any stats, just that our lonely lizard, cast out from his clan due to his hag blood and his strange antlers, hopefully can be a little more party-friendly than your average Skeletor-inspired necromancer. We'll grab a set of skills, stealth and acrobatics from Monk, nature and survival from Hermit, and throw in perception and deception to use with our Disguise Self spell from our extra skills through Hexblood. Now that we have skills, we'll start off as a level 1 monk with a quarterstaff. Even at this level, we can cast Hex on a big boss, and on subsequent turns, dealing a potential 1d8 plus 1d6 plus Dexterity, and then 1d4 plus 1d6 plus Dexterity, which is actually a lot of damage for level 1. That boost will carry us through level 2 as we transition to Druid 1, where we start with a spell list that we can change every day, but highlights include Goodberry, Entangle, Healing Word, Protection from Evil and Good, Fairy Fire, and rituals like Detect Magic and Speak with Animals. Our hero may have more room for rituals since we'll want to cast Hex with most of our spell slots. At level 3 we will take Druid 2, and the build really starts to gel at perhaps the earliest point a multi-class character can come together. We'll take our Spore Druid subclass, wherein we gain a weak but low-cost reaction attack in Halo of Spores, and then the star of the show, the Symbiotic Entity. uses an action to activate, which at least means we can use Symbiotic Entity and Hex in the same round as we approach our enemies on the battlefield. The Symbiotic Entity ability gives us 2 important benefits: a hefty 4 temporary hit points per level, and an extra 1d6 necrotic damage per hit that does not stack with Hex. The big downside, however, is that your Symbiotic Entity feature turns off when you lose all the temporary hit points. For a full class Druid, this isn't an issue, but we're going for a mix of Monk and Spore Druid here, so we'll have to be very careful with our temporary hit points. We'll need to use our soon-to-be increased speed to stay away from our foes until we're ready to move up and make a full attack with Hex and Symbiotic Entity. In practice, if you have a good tank in your party, there'll be plenty of time you can get to use these damage powers, but they are very fragile, no doubt about that. It is also important to mention that even if we will mostly be using Symbiotic Entity in place of Wildshape, having most of the Wildshape options available to us can add a huge amount of utility to our character. Shrinking down into a mouse, or turning into a horse, or a cow, or a wolf has a lot of fun role-playing and infiltration potential. At level 4, we're at Druid 2 and Monk 2. We'll be stuck with only 8 temporary hit points from Symbiotic Entity for a long while, unfortunately, but we'll manage as best we can. We finally have Ki, meaning a bigger Nova potential with our Flurry of Blows added to our Symbiotic Entity and Hex attacks. Our increased speed will help us choose our moment to attack, depending on how your GM runs monsters against your tanks. I fully admit that there will be times that we can't get Symbiotic Entity or Hex or both online for long enough, but that's a risk most spellcasters run too. At level 5, we're taking Monk 3. Level 5 and 6 are going to be a bit of a drag since we won't have extra attack, so we'll be relying on clever use of our Hex Symbiotic Entity combination to make up the difference. Still, we do get a boost at level 5 along with our peers, as we get our Monk subclass. There are a few good options here, partly depending on how interested we are in ever taking Monk 6. Since our Hex and Symbiotic Entity damage is necrotic, if our fists never do magical damage, it might not be as debilitating as it could be. So here are the options. If we're sticking with Monk 5, Open Hand Monk works best, I think, though Way of the Astral Self mixed with the Shillelagh cantrip gives us a bonus by letting us focus on Wisdom stat increases. But if we're willing to go Monk 6, Mercy Monk and Drunken Master Monk enter the equation. Mercy Monk 6's Hands of Harm poison debuff has some heft to it, but it costs Ki, while Drunken Master will help us rush in, do a flurry of blows, and run away, with the Redirect Attack ability featuring an incredible amount of scaling because it works off of monster attacks, even if it is extremely hard to use. Sadly, the Long Death Monk, while thematically appropriate, uses temporary hit points that conflict with our Symbiotic Entity. For my build, I'm going to be using Open Hand Monk. I find that the Open Hand technique provides a high quality set of tools that scale well. Remember that you can potentially apply 2 of the effects each time you flurry, and that the third option, preventing a reaction attack, has no saving throw, serving as a poor man's disengage, astral self, reach attack, or Drunken Master technique. Most often we'll want to charge up with Hex and Symbiotic Entity, run in, use Flurry of Blows, prevent the enemy from taking a reaction attack, and then retreat behind our tanks to preserve our precious 8 temporary hit points from Symbiotic Entity. Knocking our foe prone and or pushing them 15 feet are both very useful, but most often you'd want to use that when both your first and second Flurry of Blows attacks land. Also, by the time we might have trouble with non-magical weapons, we'll probably be casting more and fighting less anyway. Lastly, and I can't believe I'm going to say this, the more levels in Druid we take, the higher our defense will be, specifically because of the temporary hit points we get every time we level up in Spore Druid. Now we're level 6, and we're taking our first feat from Monk 4. I suggest taking Skill Expert, unless you want to raise our Dexterity and Wisdom by 1 to take a Wisdom half feat later. Skill Expert goes well with the Monk because personally I think they should have had some sort of skill bonus available to them. At least this way we can be the high quality stealth character we were meant to be. Yes, I'll be putting expertise into stealth, though perception would also be great. By this point you probably know what other skill a party is missing. Grab it! Now at level 7, we are finally gaining second attack at Monk 5, and our Symbiotic Entity / Hex damage is at its height, proportional to our enemies. We've also got Stunning Strike. Be careful when you use this, monsters have exceedingly high constitution scores, so it's very unlikely to work, but I do understand the appeal. It's fun to pull off a move that nobody else can do, but particularly as an open hand monk, your ki is usually spent better on Flurry of Blows for the open hand technique options and the bonus attack. At level 8, we're going back to Spore Druid, and we'll be there for the rest of our career. Finally, our temporary HP, which yes by this point run out early in every battle, are a wholesome 12. But more importantly, we've doubled our number of spell slots and gained access to the excellent Pass Without Trace, Blindness Deafness, Enhance Ability, and Enlarge Person, which we might cast on ourselves. Spike Growth can also mix well with our 15-foot knockback power from the open hand technique in certain situations. And because we can swap our spells every day, we can take whichever spell we need for the day. Our Monk/Spore Druid gets to have it both ways, gaining 4 temporary hit points per level, or 8 if you count both uses of Symbiotic Entity per short rest, but also hitting hard when we use all of our features. We will run out of ki without regular short resting, but we are starting to get more tools as a utility caster to make up for it. At level 9, we're a Monk 5, Druid 4. We will gain our second ability score increase, this time only a level later than everyone else. We should raise either Wisdom or Dexterity. I'm going to increase my Dexterity, as we are still mostly brawling as a monk at this level. As we start to spend more time casting, I'll be happy to increase my Wisdom. And hey, +1 spell slot and +4 temporary hit points from Druid. For level 10, we'll be split at Monk 5, Druid 5. We're getting some casting staples like Dispel Magic, Water Breathing, and Revivify, but we'll likely get the most use out of Plant Growth, which we can place across the map to obstruct our opponents without needing a spell save or our concentration. We've also got Gaseous Form, which we'll use as an infiltration/fly substitute, and of course Animate Dead. As a monk hybrid, getting this spell 5 levels late, do you even need to bother with Animate Dead? Perhaps not. But if you're able to convince your GM that your neutral hero has discovered plant animating powers, then grab a skeleton and give it a bow and have it shoot arrows from the back lines. But we don't need to use this spell. You might even ask the GM to swap it out for something else if the GM insists that Animate Dead will cause your character to be instantly killed by the party or NPCs for, evil. Still, it can be fun, just talk to your GM. For level 11, Monk 5, Druid 6, we may or may not be able to summon a zombie with our Fungal Infestation feature, because, well, talk to your GM about the whole necromancy issue. The zombie you summon does have a chance at survival, because even with 1 hit point, zombies have a chance to use their Undead Fortitude feature to survive. They don't hit hard, but it can still be nice to have 1 or 2 extra figures on the battlefield to take up space and absorb a hit or 2. At Druid 7, the star is Polymorph, or level 12, but if we turn ourselves into a giant ape, an extra 157 hit points will still be helpful, though sadly we can't retain our unarmored defense while polymorph the way we can with Wildshape. That said, Tasha's gave us access to Fire Shield, which is an ideal spell to stack onto our existing buffs, and we're still gaining 4 temporary hit points every level on our symbiotic entity. At Druid 8, we can raise our Wisdom score to help us be the caster we are slowly becoming. At Druid 9, we're level 14, so we can cast Cone of Cold, but a variety of utility spells are going to be more useful to us, Wall of Stone and Scrying especially. At Monk 5 Druid 10, we're able to throw our Spores, which has limited uses, honestly, but it's still an AoE. It's worth doing if you're casting a spell and have nothing to do with your bonus action. At Druid 11, we're a 16th level character. Just like when we got to levels 10 and 11, and our reward was being a competent caster of 3rd level spells, now our reward at level 16 is being able to cast a 6th level spell. It may not sound like much, but since you can swap these out each day, Heal, Move Earth, and Sunbeam all have some pretty hefty game impact, and Windwalk and Transport via Plants can change the way you move around the game world, albeit someone else probably got Teleportation Circle a while ago, but still. At 18th level, we're a Druid 13, and we got a nice bonus of being able to cast Reverse Gravity, which can certainly punch above its weight, as you'll find few monsters that are immune to gravity. And there's even an argument to cast Regenerate on yourself, so that even if you go down, you'll be healed back to 1 hit point on your turn. Not ideal, might be better on a fighter, but still, a spell that shouldn't be underestimated. At Druid 14, we get a tanky feature that makes us immune to the blindness, deafness, frightened, and poisoned conditions, and crits against us our normal hits. This feature isn't great for a normal druid, but we're a skirmishing monk, so it may get some use. And for our capstone, we'll get Druid 15, giving us access to the Animal Shapes spell, a very powerful spell if you know a village full of commoners or can hire such a village, the Antipathy Sympathy spell, Feeble Mind, Earthquake. We lost out on 9th level spells, but as long as you can still flatten a village or turn all the people you need to rescue into elephants, I think you're doing okay. I hope that I've made an argument for this build as something that works throughout the levels, in large part because as long as you get short rests, in the later levels you'll be glad to have all the extra temporary hit points from Symbiotic Entity, and the build does come online earlier than most, which is certainly a point in its favor. Still, if you don't get many or any short rests, your ki and your wild shapes will run out very quickly, diminishing the power of this character. Yet, I'm proud of this character as a sort of monk fix, giving us a way to make a monk that can have those big damage moments, and have better survivability than many monks with our temporary hit points, and by the end of the game, we'll have acknowledged that even full class monks will be somewhat left behind, so we've transitioned into a primary spellcaster. Later on, I'll do a monk fix build that will only have a dip or two to see what's possible with a straight monk, but I love the Spore Druid and I love monks, and I contend that they are two great tastes that taste great together. Our slightly amoral lizard folk will be continuing on his quest to find the hags that cursed him, bringing his martial mastery and animistic powers to bear on them. Even if we don't use Animate Dead or Fungal Infestation, we'll still have a good time, so I encourage you to give the Monk Spore Druid a try. Thanks for watching all the way to the end. Consider liking this video, maybe hit that subscribe button, and remember, never ever make a deal with a hag.